and I was stepping into the boat, and I saw something floating in the water. And I looked down, and to my complete horror, it was a fully formed, beautiful baby girl. That was my introduction to the issue of gendercide.
Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm Christine Niles. In 1979, China implemented its one-child policy, a population control program that many people at the time didn't know actually involved forced sterilizations and forced abortions. China was spurred on by fears, great fears of demographic explosion, overpopulation. Since that time, we know that that's not true, and that the population control policies implemented by many countries around the world have actually been catastrophic and devastating, not just for the society, for communities and families, but also for the economy. Japan is one of the countries that's learning that now, but many others are as well. China, of course, being chief among them. But like I said, most of the world did not know at the time that this one-child policy involved forced abortions, forced sterilizations, jail time, penalties, fees for parents who disobeyed that policy. It wasn't until recent years that this knowledge became known widely in America, thanks to the pioneering work of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, spearheaded by one of my personal heroes, Reggie Littlejohn. Here she is talking about a case that she could not forget.
One case that I'll never forget is of a young woman who was 7 months pregnant without a birth permit. So that would be an illegal pregnancy. Who was walking down the street, and she was grabbed by family planning cadres, dragged off the street, strapped down to a table, forced to abort the baby that she very desperately wanted. And in the end, one of the medical personnel came to her with the body of her aborted baby and said, "You need to pay for this so that we can dispose of the body." And she said she didn't have any money, so they just laid that body right next to her in the bed. And I've got a photograph of her looking down and just grieving the loss of this 7-month-old baby that was forcibly aborted.
It was stories like these that Reggie brought to the awareness of the American public that helped them to understand the atrocities happening in China committed against women and against girls. Coming up, I will be talking one-on-one with Reggie, all about her work, what's going on in China, and how you can help. Stay tuned. I hope you're enjoying the show. No, this is not the part where I tell you the rest of the show is behind the paywall. In fact, I'm hoping to make all my episodes free. If you haven't signed up for our email, please do so by visiting stellamaris.media and signing up. I've got a number of projects I'm excited about at Stella Maris Media, but we are entirely self-funded. So if you are able to give, go to stellamaris.media and click on Support Our Work. Thanks so much for watching, and back to the show. Reggie Littlejohn is the founder of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, an organization dedicated to ending forced abortion and sexual slavery in China. She is a graduate of Yale Law School, a litigation attorney, and she's an international expert in China's one-child policy. Now it's a three-child policy. But her organization is called The Leading Voice, exposing the regime of forced abortion and gendercide in China. And I've admired Reggie's work for so long. It's a great honor to have you on my show. Welcome to the show, Reggie.
Christine, it's an honor to be here, and I am a huge fan of yours. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you so much. Your work, we're going to get into the projects that you're working on right now. But before we do so, can you talk about how you first got involved in this work?
Well, as you mentioned, I am an attorney. I represented a Chinese refugee in the mid-90s in the San Francisco Bay Area. And at that time, I had no reason not to believe the Chinese propaganda, which was that the one-child policy was voluntary. I knew they had a one-child policy. I never stopped to think about how it was enforced. So I represented this refugee who had been forcibly sterilized And the reason is that she had 2 children, right? So under the one-child policy, that was a big no-no. And they literally picked her up, dragged her out of her home, screaming and pleading and crying, held her down to a table, and performed a tubal ligation, which is major, abdominal surgery with no anesthesia. And she said it was like somebody holding a blowtorch inside of her. It was so incredibly painful. Predictably, she got a massive infection and was permanently disabled at the point that I represented her. And that was my introduction to the fact that the one-child policy was enforced through forced abortion, forced sterilization, and infanticide. I just remember sitting in my office on a sunny day in San Francisco and looking out and just admiring the city and just thinking to myself, here I am leading living the American dream, and I can't believe that at this moment, on the other side of the earth in China, women are being dragged out of their homes and forcibly aborted at 9 months of pregnancy. It was inconceivable to me, and the numbers are inconceivable, Christine. It's like the Chinese Communist Party, this was 10 years ago, estimated that they had prevented 400 million lives through the one-child policy. I believe it's probably closer to 500 million at this point, 500 million. But and this was done through forced abortion, forced sterilization, and infanticide. And so the suffering and the loss are absolutely incalculable. So I ended up leaving the practice of law and establishing Women's Rights Without Frontiers. And our first goal was to expose and oppose forced abortion in China. That's how I got started.
And what year was that?
Oh, that was, probably 12 years ago at this point. We got our nonprofit status. But I represented the refugee in the mid-90s.
A lot of people didn't know about that forced abortion regime back then. And your organization really did help to bring that to the fore so that a lot of people, many, many more people now are aware of that. But I mean, absolutely, horrific stories. So God bless you for taking action, because there are plenty of people out there who might come across very disturbing information, but then just never actually act on it. But you did. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously at the time was the one-child policy. Now that it's now the 3-child policy. It's been relaxed a bit, but are women still having to undergo forced sterilizations and abortions today in China?
All right, so here's the thing. I've called repeatedly on the Chinese Communist Party to end all coercive population control in China. They are desperate to have more babies. They have basically effectuated their own demise by decimating the young population. Now they don't have enough young people to support their elderly population, and their workforce is going down. They need babies. Why can't they just have no coercive population control policy? Why do they have to have a 3-child policy? And the answer, I believe, is that well, first of all, we don't really know what's going on inside of China, whether forced abortions are occurring under the 3-child policy. It's still illegal for a single woman to have a baby. You have to be married, and it's also illegal for 4th children to be born. And and China is a big country. They, different areas of China enforce things differently. We don't really know what's going on the provincial level in China. But what I do suspect is that one of the main reasons that they want to keep a 3-child policy is to be able to use it as a weapon against disfavored minorities, namely the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, against whom they are committing genocide, and the Tibetans. That's why I think that they're continuing it. I personally believe that they're continuing with forced abortion in those areas.
One of the most heartbreaking and disturbing reports I had to do back when I was at Church Militant was covering the abandoned girls, the forgotten girls. There was this documentary I'm sure you've seen called The Dying Rooms, about these poor abandoned girls because of this policy, who are left to basically die without medical care, food, in these dying rooms and orphanages. Can you talk about the impact that this has had on girls and women?
So there was an estimate, and again, this is an old estimate. I think that the number is higher, that there are 200 million women and girls missing in the world due to sex-selective abortion, abandonment, and neglect. So who knows what the true number is, and who knows what it is, now. Might be 300 million. But that number, even 200 million, is more than all of the fatalities of all the wars of the 20th century. So I would say that this is the true war on women and girls. And so what's happened in China is, number one, their population is plummeting. First of all, from a lack of women. Second of all, they've got these things called bachelor villages, where these are usually remote villages where basically there's only men and maybe some elderly living there, because all the women are upwardly mobile, so they get out of those remote villages and marry men in the towns or in the cities or whatever. And that's, that leads to social instability. You have, gosh, I don't know, an estimated probably 40 million marriage age men in China who are just frustrated because they'll never find wives. They're called bare branches because they will never reproduce. They're the end of the family line. So those are two outcomes of the sex selective abortion of baby girls.
And can you explain to our American audience, why is it in Chinese culture that we have so many girls who are aborted or abandoned? Why are they the ones and not the boys?
According to traditional culture in China, and not just China, also India, and then there are other countries in the world that have gendercide as well. But at least in China, boys are the ones who have to bury the parents. So otherwise there's problems with the afterlife. Also, boys under traditional society, the boys are the ones who are to support the parents in old age. And there is a saying in China that is, to raise a girl is to water somebody else's garden. So what that means is that all the love, all the care, all the expense, everything you pour into raising a daughter is going to go to the son's family. Because traditionally, the young woman, when she marries a young man, the two of them go over to his parents' family and support his parents in their old age. So there are people in China who feel that their choice is either to commit gendercide or to endure impoverishment in their old age.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. And you haven't just talked the talk, you've walked the walk, and you rescued two girls from a political activist in China. Can you talk about Rita and Annie?
All right. So, yeah, in terms of what we've done at Women's Rights Without Frontiers, we've saved over 300 baby girls in rural China, and we can talk about that later. But there are two girls that we personally brought over. They are the daughters of an extremely brave activist. His name is Zhang Lin. And he's a brilliant guy. He was studying to be a nuclear physicist in Beijing, and then dropped all of that in order to participate as a leader in the Tiananmen Square movement. He wasn't on Tiananmen Square, but he was the leader of the movement in Anhui province. And for that, he was jailed and tortured horribly, repeatedly. And every time he got out of jail, he'd go right back to exposing the atrocities of the Chinese Communist Party. So finally, they started persecuting his 10-year-old daughter, Annie. And Annie was kidnapped out of her 4th grade classroom, spent the night in custody. So she is known as China's youngest prisoner of conscience. She was reunited with her father. They put the two of them under house arrest. They managed to escape house arrest and made it to Beijing. The father knew he was going to be caught. So before he was caught, he got word out to me saying, could you please help me get Annie out of China because she can't lead a normal life here. And I said to my husband, there's this girl in China and she needs our help. And he said, okay, I know what you want. She can live with us. So with the help of very brave people in China, 4 or 5 of whom were themselves detained, and some of them were tortured terribly, we were able to help. Well, they really are the ones who got her out of China, but we were able to get her into the United States. And we raised Annie in our own home from ages 10 to 18. And we also had her older sister, Rita, in our home for a couple of years. She came at age 19, so she was on her own by 21.
Amazing. That's just so beautiful. And, I was watching the video that you published on your YouTube page a few months ago with both of them talking during the 10th anniversary of Women's Rights Without Frontiers. It was so sweet because they were talking about how you're their hero and they admire you so much. So almost had me in tears, really. So what a beautiful, amazing story. God bless you for that. And of course, I should clarify, you've saved hundreds of babies. So could you talk a little bit about that? I know you have a Save a Girl campaign, but then you have other campaigns as well, like Save a Widow in China, but also you're spreading out to Uganda as well.
Right. So in China, what we do is we have a network in China, which is unique. No one else has a network in China that is saving baby girls and abandoned widows. They are taking their freedom into their hands every day by doing this. But what we do is we have a field worker that goes between the widows and the babies. Last year, we were supporting about 150 families in China. And the field worker will learn about a mother who is either being pressured to abort her baby girl, or more likely these days, she's being pressured to abandon her. In other words, give her up to another family, actually that she's so stressed out that she can't feed her daughter. This is very common in the countryside, that the women cannot produce milk because they don't have enough to eat themselves. And they have to buy milk powder for their girls, and they don't have any money to do that. So we will go to the door and say, congratulations on your baby girl. Girls are as good as boys, and we will offer you a monthly stipend for a year to empower you to keep your daughter. And so then the mother, who has been pressured by her husband and by her mother-in-law to give up the baby girl, can go back to them and say, look, I can't abort. I can't abandon this baby girl. She's a lucky girl. She already is bringing money into the family. And we've been able to keep girls with their mothers, over 300 of them. And some of them actually saved their lives through the Save a Girl campaign. This is another thing, is that even though China now has a 3-child policy, baby girls are still at risk, because if they are the second daughter, or God forbid, the third daughter, women are really pressured to either, try to get an abortion, which is getting more difficult now because the government needs more children, or more likely to give her up to another family. And the mothers don't want to do that. Can you imagine giving your second child or your third child up, because she's a girl? They don't want to. So we help them keep their daughters.
Amazing. And then are you also helping widows as well?
So when we, I call widows the invisible victims of the one-child policy. Under traditional Chinese culture in the countryside, they had huge farming families. And so that when a couple got old, they would have a large family to help them. And now, because of the one-child policy, they don't have a large family, or maybe even any family to help them. And so these widows are just completely destitute. And also, some of them are actually, senior suicide is a big issue in the Chinese countryside, especially of women. And so a lot of them are committing suicide. So we go to their doors and we say, you are a human being, created by God in his image, and we want to help you. And they are astonished. No one has ever come to them to just want to help them for no reason other than that they are a human being created by God in his image. And a lot of the widows and a lot of the mothers are coming to faith. Lots of them being baptized, wanting to go to church. Of course, all of this has to be done very quietly because it's illegal to evangelize in China. And so we don't tell anybody where our network is. And if people want to pray, do pray that God will continue to hide our field workers under the shadow of his wing, because we need to stay out away from the authorities.
Right. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. You were instrumental. Women's Rights Without Frontiers was instrumental in bringing over the blind activist Chen Guangcheng, who was horribly persecuted. He was trying to expose the regime of forced abortion there. He was placed under house arrest. Can you talk a little bit about your role in all of that?
Well, in the very beginning, before we even became a nonprofit, I learned about Chen Guangcheng, and my heart went out to him, because what he and his wife did is they exposed, and with great bravery, the fact that they estimated there were something like 290,000 forced abortions and forced sterilizations just in their town. It was Linyi County, in just 1 year.
And so if you extrapolate that out for all of China and all the years that the one-child policy was in force, I mean, the number is just astronomical. But they went out and documented this stuff at great risk to themselves. And when they were caught, he was thrown in jail and tortured. And so I found out about this. So what I did is I just basically started a worldwide campaign to free Chen Guangcheng. And one of the things that we did was we did something we called the sunglasses campaign, because something I don't know if I mentioned that he was blind. He became blind I think he was 3 years old from a high fever. So he was born sighted and then became blind through illness and wore sunglasses. And so I got people from all over the world to put on sunglasses and email a picture to me of themselves wearing sunglasses. And then an artist put all these together into a portrait of Chen Guangcheng. And I went and advocating, all in the United States. There's a picture of me with Congressman Chris Smith, both of us wearing sunglasses, standing on either side of that portrait. And then
That's
also
great.
in Europe. And then he was, in fact, freed. And then that's its own story.
That's amazing. I also know that you are starting an anti-globalist initiative. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So because of my experience with the Chinese Communist Party and seeing the way that their tactics and their brutality in confronting them over the one-child policy, I became very alarmed to see it coming to the United States and worldwide through COVID practices and through the World Health Organization. So when COVID came, there was a lot of sort of fear porn, I would call it, going around to try to terrify people into agreeing to lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccine mandates. And this is the China model. And the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, is close to China. And he was basically mouthing the lies of the Chinese Communist Party, telling the world, for example, that there was no human transmission, there's no need to stop flights from China, and if you do that, you are, a racist. And so then what that did is it enabled flights to go from China to all over the world and infect the world, and then impose these measures. And central to what the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum, the United Nations are trying to do is to convince the world that everybody needs a digital ID. And these digital IDs can be used as the same platform as the China social credit system, which is a tool of mass surveillance and totalitarian control. So I first started something called the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force. I was the co-founder and co-chair of that. And then moved on to that to see that the World Health, the new pandemic treaty that is under discussion, and the international health regulation amendments that are going to be voted on this May would damage or destroy our national sovereignty and our personal medical freedom. So I co-founded something called the Sovereignty Coalition. And then the Sovereignty Coalition has been tremendously effective and successful in countering these things. So I'm about to launch something called the Anti-Globalist Alliance. So that's you can get there, antiglobalist.net, but it's hard. It's being suppressed by Google. So you have to put quotes on it, and you have to use a Brave search or some other search engine besides, Google, because you won't get there through Google. If you try to get to the Anti-Globalist Alliance through Google, you'll get an article at the top of the page about how, anti-globalism is a conspiracy theory.
Right.
You won't get to my website, but yeah, we are launching that, and we are taking this model worldwide to try to stop, first of all, the passage of the new pandemic treaty and the international health regulation amendments.
I want to dedicate a whole show to China's surveillance state and their power grab during COVID, because if any country has suffered under this, it's China more than any other, I think, simply because of the incredible, massive increase of power by the Chinese government using COVID as an excuse. Just locking people up, detention camps, locking them down, padlocking them in their apartments, people starving to death. Just horrors, and they want to bring it here to the U.S.
That's where we are heading if we continue down this path.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'm going to have you back on another show just to talk about that, because that is a whole another show unto itself. Reggie, tell people, please, where they can find Women's Rights Without Frontiers, where they can go, how they can help.
Okay, Women's Rights Without Frontiers, just spelled out like that, .org. That's Women's Rights Without Frontiers.org. And then we've got buttons on the upper right-hand side of the screen, Save a Girl campaign, Save a Widow campaign for China. And we also are saving widows in Uganda, if that interests you. Just click on those and you can learn, you can see videos of some of our girls and some of our widows that we are supporting, and then you can donate. I mean, this is the only way that you can actually get money directly into the hands of a woman of an at-risk daughter or a widow in China or Uganda.
Wonderful. Women's Rights Without Frontiers.org. All right, Reggie, so wonderful to talk with you. God bless you. God bless your work. God bless your family as well.
Thank you so much, and God bless you too, Christine.
All right. Okay, so just remember, Women's Rights Without Frontiers.org. Please go support them. I cannot think of a more worthy organization to support. Please pray for the success of their organization, and please pray for the suffering people of China that continue to suffer to this day. All right, thank you so much for watching and listening. And in the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward boldly.